Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds, and in today's video topic, we'll be going over Bleed Smite Hammer Throw Paladin, a fan favorite of mine, and I'm sure you guys will love it just as much, especially with the VFX upgrade it got recently with the Sentinel rework. So this is normally where I shill for myself, as I don't take sponsors or anything like that, nor do I ask for any form of payment for this work other than what YouTube gives me due to ad revenue. If you have been enjoying the steady stream of last Epoch content of late and haven't subscribed, maybe do so. This is one of the best places currently to find strong last Epoch builds, as unlike some, I actually test my builds versus high level content, as I like to push my builds to the limits, and we're so insanely close to 5,000 subscribers, which is mental to me as I never thought I'd ever push past 500. So I was going to play Devotion Cock Hammer Throw because I was having a conversation with a big PoE streamer the other day, and he told me that self-cast Smite is better than Hammer Throw Smite, and that self-cast was more reliable. So I tried both out, and obviously Hammer Throw won, due to just having more damage and smoother gameplay. But then, of course, I realized I was just playing a bad version of an already existing build by JayTheProduct here, the Void Smite version, which I will be leaving a link in the description if you want to play the Void version of this build. So instead of pumping out a bad build that's just inferior, I would go and try something different. And then I realized now that if I can play Bleed again, I could go Bleed Hammers. I had played this archetype a very long time ago, so it's nice to finally be able to revive it. So if you don't understand what's happening on screen, I am throwing out 3 hammers at once, and they rotate around me and follow me as I go. They all can hit the same target multiple times and apply bleeds. Then they have a decent chance to cast Smite on target on hit, and those smites can hit up to 7 enemies at once, as you have the original smite and the 6 lightning bolts from the smite all hit enemies around it. This leads to a lot of screen clutter, as you can tell. But it's so insanely satisfying as you're hitting packs like 3 to 4 times in a row, resulting in a lot of bleed stacks, which is how we deal our damage. We run a few uniques to create this situation. Flair's Pride has become a shield I've come to love, as with the generic bleed chance and bleed effect both on the same base, it means builds like this come to fruition as you get plenty of global bleed chance through it and stuff like a Dragonbone Axe. This means every time we either hit the enemy with Smite or Hammers, we at least apply 4 bleeds each time, stacking up very quickly even on a single target. This on top of being able to run a lot of bleed duration through Valdir's Chalice and the bleed duration idols, which can also roll physical damage over time, which I think is insane. This means we stack a large amount of long-lasting bleeds, making our clear feel fantastic and explosive while also not losing much single target. I still think this build is a little less effective than the Void version, mainly because to make this build the best it can be, you want to have stuff like a legendary Flair's Pride with block chance, which I don't have, as it suffers a slight bit from having a worse on average base of a shield, but it's definitely close enough where I don't feel bad in showcasing it. With all that being said, let's get into the video, shall we? Alright, here we are in game with the build, with the bleed hammered in here. So the general skill rotation is to simply, of course, at the start of a mono, set up a reversal trick, of course, so that you have sigils up always, and of course the sigils on kill will be enough to do the rest of it. Now, for just normal mono gameplay, you just kind of stutter step and throw out hammers as you go along. I am grabbing the reduced projectile speed, which makes it so you have a lot more hammers at once without having to have the echo chance like the Void Knight version. The Void Knight version likes the higher projectile speed because you're chewing out way more hammers, while the Paladin version doesn't get this luxury, so you definitely want to go for the less projectile speed, so you just have generally more hammers. And we make up the fact of not having as many hammers by just having smite procs do a lot of the AoE clear. So yeah, that's pretty much it for skill rotation. And of course, if you get like a mini boss or whatever, or like a, of course, like a rare, you can just reversal and just do a bunch of damage with reversal, obviously. And then for bosses, just simply set up a reversal trick, pop your Holy Aura, pop your Volatile Reversal, and then just go to town. Most bosses you can just face tank, other than that Oribus I was showing in the clip, because poison damage is rough and stuff like that. As you can tell, we're getting to like 300k bleed ticks, and that's not taking into account if there's two enemies, because if there's two enemies, each smite proc will actually hit both enemies uh, because of the lightning bolt. So you can get even crazier if there's like two bosses. So this is actually really good for bosses like Spirits of Fire. So if you ever wanted to farm Spirits of Fire for like a legendary Logies, oh, this is the build for you. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the skill rotation. It's pretty simple. Like, keep it simple, stupid. It's like very simple. So for skills, first off, we're going to talk about hammer throw. So you take 1 point travel into winged hammers, 1 point travel into steadfast path, 1 point into iron spiral. This makes it so that the hammers, they spiral around you. Now if you don't have the node that makes it so they follow, they just stay in place, which is preferable if you're doing content like arena, because if you have the hammers stay in place, what that means is you can have enemies follow you and walk into the hammers and die. So if you're doing arena, that's what you want to do. But for general monolith gameplay, you definitely want to take the point into hammer vortex and make them follow you, as having them follow you is really, really strong, because you can kind of like lunge into a pack here, like here, and all those hammers will all hit enemies and all proc smites, and you can like blow up the screen very quickly with this setup. Then 2 points into catapult. This makes it so we shoot out 3 instead of 1. Very important. Then 6 points into ballista. This percentage more damage just applied to our bleeds, which is nice. And of course, the -6 mana cost is essential, as we definitely want our hammer throw costs as low as possible. I am running one -4 ring. I am not running it for the -4. You do not need -4. You only need two -3 rings to make it feel good. I am just simply running a -4 because all the other rolls were insane on this ring. So I was like, why not? Right. You could definitely do it on 3 costs. With this, with 8 mana regen, that's plenty to like sustain your hammers. You don't have a single problem with sustaining your mana, right? Like, we do have a little bit of a degen when we're like throwing out all of our hammers, but it's such a low amount that it doesn't matter. Then 3 points travel, 3 points into rapid throw, so we get more attack speed. This build has a significant portion of attack speed, so putting points into this node doesn't really matter for us. Then 5 points into weighted hammers for 75% more damage. Like I said, this makes it so that we actually have more hammers on the screen than normal, and it also makes it so each hammer deals more damage. Now, the problem with this version is, what happens is when you don't have hammers, it takes a longer time to get to that point where you have a bunch of hammers spinning around you. So you kind of want to like stutter step through the mono and always throw out hammers. And if you do so, you'll always have hammers to throw out, which is good. So you just have to like learn to like just simply kind of like make sure you're always throwing hammers. Otherwise, you won't have hammers in the mono. Then that's pretty much it for hammer throw. If you had +2 to hammer throw, you could always put it into rapid throw, or you could put it into guardian zeal for the increased damage, because this build definitely lacks increased damage, which is why we're doing the idle setup that we are. And for sigils, stereotypical sigil setup, armor, of course, armor's very good, duration's very good. Of course, max sigils is good. Then, of course, the block is good, especially since our block chance is so low due to the fact we're using a Flayer's Pride. We could definitely have way more block if this was a legendary Flayer's Pride, but it is not, so I cannot. Uh, Obviously, if you want to get a Flayer's Pride, I would heavily suggest farming Fall of the Outcasts. Yeah, that's why we're running block chance there. And of course, the increased damage is always nice, because having more increased damage means the better for our bleeds here. Then, of course, the sigils on kill is absolutely insane, and monoliths makes it so you don't have to actually cast your sigils in monoliths, which is a pain point for this kind of setup. So, like, it's nice to be able to just simply cast your sigils. And since your hammers cost so little in the boss fight, you don't have to actually do a reversal trick in the mono, because as you can tell, my mana is going slightly up slowly. So you don't have to actually like kind of like use a reversal trick if you don't want to, which is nice. Then for Smite here, this is completely different than normal Smite builds, because this is different. 2 points travel into Blinding Flash, 2 points travel into Piety. We don't care about the Electrify stuff. 1 point to Order of the God. Thank God that this only converts Ignite. into electrify, otherwise this build would be broken because you wouldn't be able to apply bleeds. Then 1 point into unbalanced scale for the extra lightning bolts, then 3 points here. This is what's causing all the screen AoE. So whenever our smite comes down, it hits 6 different targets every single time, and we only have 2 smite idols. Imagine if we had 4. Imagine how ridiculous it would look. So definitely you do not need more than this. This is plenty. And of course, 5 points into sacrifice. So this significantly more damage. This applies to the bleeds that you proc because it doesn't say hit. So that's why we're grabbing this. And of course, we take 5 points into atonement so we don't end up killing ourselves. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Smite. Of course, I have like 1 extra point in Holy Wave because if you have the AoEs big enough, they can overlap, especially on single target, which means you can get healed for a fuck ton. We have a little bit of healing effectiveness, I think, so it's healing us for a decent amount each time Smite comes down. It just helps us become tankier and tankier. Reversal, stereotypical dot reversal setup, nothing really different here. Then Holy Aura, stereotypical throwing attack setup, nothing really different here. I know I like talk about these things like as if you should know, but if you just look at the node, it's like attack speed, global attack speed. We're doing a throwing attack build. We want more throwing attack speed, haste chance. Like obviously, these are like obvious choices, right? And it's like there's no point in explaining them because if you just take 5 seconds and read the nodes, you're like, hey, take increased damage over time. Of course, that's why he's running it, right? So yeah, I do explain, like I said, the main ones because they are more complicated than just, oh, this is good. No, this is why it's good. While these are picks in the meta that are just all the same. Like they've been the same for like a year now. Obviously, I hope one day they change, but like I said, this has just been how it is for like a whole year now. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this. Now for the gearing here, I mean the passives actually, we take 8 points Fearless because HP, we want as much HP as possible. 5 points in Gladiator, we have a very bad shield, so we want as much block chance as possible and block effectiveness to make up for that. 5 points into Armor Clad, definitely we want to be standing near enemies because not only do we get the Smite procs to heal us, we also get this DR. 2 points travel into Valiant Charge, 5 points into Axe Thrower. The reason why we have Axe Thrower is because this is another hit. Since we have a bunch of global bleed chance, we don't care about where the hits are coming from per se. We just care about the fact that there are hits. So this is an extra hit. It has a second cooldown, but that's fine. Then 5 points into Blade Master for increased attack speed. This is global attack speed. So since we have an axe equipped, it does apply to the throwing attack speed, as you can tell, which is really good for us. Then 1 point into Steel Aegis for the block chance. We need these points elsewhere. Otherwise, we would put 5 points into this. Then for Void Knight, of course, always grabbing Abyssal Endurance because it is one of the strongest nodes in the entire game. So it's like, why not use it? Then Paladin here, 8 points into Conviction for the Fizz Pen. Fizz Pen obviously is really strong for dots. Like dots in general are really strong with penetration because it is a more damage modifier to them that not other builds can really take advantage of as much as dots because dots don't get like crit and stuff like that. So any amount of more damage they can get, the better, right? 5 points into Honor for the block effectiveness and block chance, of course, and to travel up farther in the tree. 10 points into Valor for the HP. We want as much HP as humanly possible. Same thing with Holy Symbol. The necrotic resistance is nice, although I'm running double Ivory Ring, so my necrotic resistance is overkill, but definitely you could put this somewhere else into like the endurance maybe, but I just went for the HP and the healing effectiveness. Then 1 point travel into Sanctuary Guardian. Later on, when you get like better necrotic res or whatever, you could technically put into Sanctuary Guardian instead and get a bunch of flat armor, which is nice. 1 point to Shield Wall, of course, for the flat block and health gained on block. Now, cannot dodge doesn't really matter because dodge hasn't been relevant since 8.2. 1 point travel into Faith Armor, 8 points into Penance because this is throwing bleed chance. This was actually nerfed. It used to be 200%. We still feel that nerf to this day. 12 points into Prayer Aegis. There's a lot of EHP with Endurance Threshold and HP, so it's really nice to have. The haste stuff doesn't really matter. 7 points into Redemption for the bleed effectiveness. This is one of the reasons why Paladin is so strong with bleed builds because it has bleed effectiveness built into the tree, but thanks to the additions of a bunch of bleed effect everywhere else, it's not as bad now. 12 points into Reverence of Duality for the increased health, of course, because as much HP as humanly possible. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the tree here. Now, if you wanted to be faster and you didn't necessarily care about chunk, right? If you're like in 200 corruption and you want more movement speed, you could always take the points out of Prayer Aegis and put it into Light of Rai. Now, you're not benefiting from any of the increased damage, but movement speed is a premium these days. So definitely having more movement speed, the better. So that's one thing I would do if you're not doing 400 corruption like I am. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the passives. Now for the gearing here. Stupid, wrong button. I clicked G because G for gearing, right? So helmet here, bleed duration percentage and bleed effect. That bleed duration actually isn't that strong here because we get bleed duration everywhere else. So it'd be better to have chance to bleed while wielding an axe. I would rather have that than bleed effect, of course. Endurance, HP. The helmet's perfect. You don't need this. This is actually really overkill. Just a bleeding heart would be fine. Obviously, I have really good gear, so I like to show off my really good gear. My axe is absolutely terrible. After having to respec this build like 3 times in a row, I didn't really have a slot for this, so I just went and picked a axe off the ground and threw shit at it, and this is what I got. Obviously, you could make much better in like a few minutes. I just was not lucky and did not drop a Dragonbone axe that was better. There aren't any unique axes that you want because most of them are melee damage focused. So so for just throwing stuff, you just want a Dragonbone axe because it gives you generic bleed, then generic bleed, fizz damage, damage over time. I'll probably fix that in the planner. Then for the chest here, bleed effect, chance to bleed while wielding an axe, HP. Obviously, crit avoid base is a really good chest, other than of course, the dodge. For chest, you could use as a legendary potential. If you could land something like a Wings of Argentus, obviously with like bleed effect or whatever, that would be nice. Or if you could like land a, what is it called? The shield, the Woven Flesh. Woven Flesh is a very good slot for the chest because it means you don't have to care about crit avoid. And it's also, you can also farm it inside Follow the Outcast while you're farming for your legendary potential Flayer's Pride. So it's definitely an option, right? And the increased damage leeches health. It applies to the Bleeding Heart and the Valdir's Chalice, so you get even better leech. So that's nice. Of course, the crit avoidance is the main reason. Of course, the leech rate's really strong too. But yeah, overall, LP Woven Flesh would be insane for this build with just like bleed chance, bleed effect, or whatever. The HP isn't as important because getting the crit avoid means you're slotting on all the other pieces of gear is a lot easier. You could run like a Dawn Helm, which would give you like a bunch of flat armor and stuff like that. Of course, Flayer's Pride. This is one of the best items in the build. Just having that 85% global bleed chance and bleed effect, it makes it so you don't have to run Salt the Wounds for bleed effect, and it's very strong. That global bleed chance is, of course, very strong for your smites and for your hammers. So this is a very good slot for, legendary potential. Now, I'm sad because I was debated. So that 83% reduced health cost of spells, I assumed that that would work with sacrifice. That's what made me try this build in the first place. But it sadly does not work. EHG has responded. They are going to change the name of that mod. They don't want this to interact with that way. So just ignore it. Just pretend it doesn't exist. Would have been cool, but whatever. Rings, of course, you don't need T6, you need T1. You literally need T1 throwing attack mana cost because it gives you the -3. And of course, throwing attack speed. That's what you want exalted, like on this ring. This is exactly what you want actually on a ring. We'll talk about this one because throwing attack speed is insane for this build because the more throwing attack speed, the better. Then of course the T1, I think, or T1 throwing mana cost because you want it as low as possible. Then HP, resistance, crit avoid, endurance, block chance. Definitely want block chance. You want as much block chance as possible with this build to make up for the fact that we're using such a shitty shield. Then Ivory Ring here with same stuff, crit avoid, block effect, stuff like that. Belt, fizz damage. You can either run mana regen here just to make sure that you're staying up on mana. Then, of course, cleanse, HP. HP is a good belt. For the belt, you definitely want a Thorn Slinger legendary potential here. This would definitely help a lot. It gives you movement speed, throwing attack speed, give you bleed chance on hit, which is global. Then, of course, plus to physical, which you could use on hammer throw. So, all in all, this would be really nuts if you get like a +2 potential or something like that with HP on it. You don't necessarily need the cleanse. Mainly just like getting a bunch of HP on a Thorn Slinger would be absolutely nut tier. Gloves, throwing attack speed, block chance, health, and of course damage over time. Now, another thing you can do for this, I think they're called river benders. You could obviously go for a pair of river benders with what do you call it? With legendary potential. The reason why you would do so, not only does it have flat HP, if you could land like HP, block, and all that, you also get the extra axe per second. So you see how it's the same exact axe that comes out of this. It just gives you an extra one. So you not only have one, but you have 2 per second, which gives you more hits, which would give you more bleed per second on single targets and stuff like that. So it's definitely an option if you have a really good pair of legendary river bends. Then of course the boots, of course, like my god tier boots, I'm always using them because I love them. They're my babies. And of course, Valdir's Chalice is another legendary potential candidate. You can get plus to hammer throw, you can get plus to smite, you can get HP, you can get resistances on this. It's really ridiculous. The health gain per stack of bleed on target is ridiculous because we have such a long duration on our bleeds. It means enemies, when they die, they have like 20 plus bleeds on them, which means we get a bunch of health back. This is the main reason why this build even functions and is so tanky. Bleed duration, of course, is always good. Global chance to bleed, and of course, the fizz dot on top of the bleed, the leech from Bleeding Heart as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Valdir's Chalice. I was trying out a Ravenous Void. Ravenous Void is definitely worth it. If you if you do have a Ravenous Void, is definitely worth to use. I wasn't using it obviously because I'm an ethical gamer, but like if you have a Ravenous Void, obviously I would heavily suggest using it because it's just a lot of extra EHP and it makes up for the fact that Flair's Pride is such a shit base. Yeah, like you said, definitely one of the first things you should be doing is farming Follow the Outcast Empowered and going for a legendary potential Flair's Pride with like block chance or block effect on it. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the gearing today. And of course, idols, duh. You want 2 chance to cast Smite idols. Now, I'm actually thinking about going to 1 because, as you can tell in the footage, it's explosive. It's ridiculous. You don't need that many smites. It causes the screen to lag. So if you're lagging, definitely take one of these off. You could go for block effect on the suffixes, which would help you make up for the fact that your block effect is so bad thanks to Flair's Pride. So there's definitely an option to do that. Then, of course, the stars of the show, the bleed duration, fizz damage over time idols, these are absolutely disgusting, much like the Hail of Arrows build with the Hail of Arrows duration and fizz damage over time. These are your best in slot idols. This is why we're going for so much generic bleed chance on our gear, is so that we can afford to run bleed duration idols, which of course just give you even more damage because as much you get really long lasting bleeds and make single target go by fast. But yeah, with all that being said, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at, and